I live in a small, peaceful town. It's the kind of place where you don't have to worry about walking alone at night. I share a one-story house with my sister, but she's rarely home since she spends most of her time at her place in Florida. I live in a small, peaceful town. It's the kind of place where you don't have to worry about walking alone at night. I share a one-story house with my sister, but she's rarely home since she spends most of her time at her place in Florida. The houses on my block are spaced about 100 to 200 feet apart, and there's a stretch of woods right across the street. I have a simple daily routine. I come home from work, make dinner, shower, relax for a bit, go for a run, have a light snack, and then head to bed. One night after my usual run, I noticed a random white van parked across the street from my house. This was strange because it's rare to see unfamiliar vehicles in our quiet neighborhood. As I walked backward toward my front door, I saw someone sitting inside the van, though it was too dark to make out any details. The glass might have been tinted, or maybe it was just the night concealing them. Later that evening, I heard a strange scraping sound outside. Curious and a little unnerved, I peeked out the window and called out, "Hello?" The noise stopped. I assumed it was just my neighbor working on something and didn't think much of it. That was the end of that night. The next day, a Friday, I followed my routine as usual. Since it was the end of my work week, I went for my nightly run a little earlier so I could meet up with friends later. When I returned, I checked to see if the van was there again, but it wasn't. Feeling relieved, I went out with my friends to a comedy club and didn't get back home until late. Exhausted, I quickly got ready for bed. As I lay down in the quiet of my room, I started hearing faint thumping and rustling noises. It sounded like it was coming from inside the walls. I pressed my ear against the wall and confirmed that something was moving in there. When I knocked on the wall, the noises stopped. I figured it might be a rodent or even a raccoon and went to check around the house. Passing by the windows, I noticed the white van parked outside again. This time, I didn't see anyone inside. 2 nights in a row now, something wasn't right. Barefoot, I went outside to inspect the exterior of my house, looking for any signs of animals getting in. When I reached the crawl space door, I saw that it was slightly ajar, and the lock had been broken off. I hadn't checked that door in weeks. Nervously, I opened it wider and peered into the darkness. Without a flashlight or my phone, I could barely see anything. But then I heard the faint sound of pebbles scraping against the concrete floor. My first thought was that it might be an animal, but as the sound grew louder, it started to resemble footsteps, human footsteps, moving toward me. In the dim light, I could just barely make out the figure of someone crouched walking toward the entrance. Terrified, I slammed the door shut and held it closed, but with the lock broken, it wouldn't stay secure. I bolted back inside the house and immediately called the police. Once they realized I had caught on to their plan. One weekend, I had the house all to myself. At 14, I had just started high school, and my parents had only recently begun trusting me to stay home alone. That weekend, I had a few friends over the first night and stayed up late both nights. It was a Saturday night when things took a terrifying turn. After hanging out with my friends, we called it a night, and I decided to walk home alone. Halfway through my walk, I noticed a car behind me. It seemed like it was following me. Feeling uneasy, I picked up my pace and started jogging. That's when the car's headlights started flashing. At that hour, I immediately assumed danger, so I broke into a full sprint toward my house. I made it home and locked the door, my heart racing. But the panic only grew when I saw the car pull up in front of my house. Someone got out and ran straight to my front door. The doorbell rang furiously, and then the pounding on the door started, loud, aggressive, and relentless. I was terrified. Feeling trapped, I ran to my room, which was on the lower level of the house near the backyard. I tried calling my parents, but they didn't pick up. They were probably fast asleep. The pounding moved from the front door to my bedroom window. I could hear them yelling, but the words were muffled. I shouted for them to leave, and in response they yelled back. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it didn't stop me from panicking. I left my room and hid in my parents' bedroom while calling 911. I explained to the dispatcher that someone had followed me home and was now trying to break in. Suddenly, the banging shifted to my parents' bedroom window. It felt like they somehow knew where I was. I screamed again for them to go away, but the dispatcher told me to stay quiet and keep hidden. Then the man outside started yelling through the window, and this time I heard him clearly. He shouted that someone had followed me home and might already be inside the house. Confused and terrified, I yelled back, "What are you talking about?" He begged me to call the police and lock myself in a room, insisting there was someone in my backyard. I told the dispatcher what he said, but she warned me not to trust him just yet and to stay locked in the room until the police arrived. I didn't know whether he was telling the truth until I heard it. Footsteps inside the house. The sound of someone walking on the wooden floor outside my parents' bedroom sent chills down my spine. I heard doors being opened one by one as they got closer. Then the doorknob to my parents' room twisted. The door was locked, but that didn't stop them. Loud bangs followed as they tried to kick the door down. I grabbed the phone and hid in the closet, whispering updates to the dispatcher. Eventually the banging stopped. I couldn't hear footsteps leaving, but that might have been because I was hiding. Soon after, the dispatcher told me the police had arrived. I suggested they check the backyard, but they entered through the front door instead, which had been left ajar. Apparently the intruder had smashed the glass panel on the back door to get in, and then left through the front. I met the police in the living room, and to my surprise, the man who had been banging on the windows was there too. He told the police that as I was walking home, he noticed someone following me. According to him, an older man had been hiding in bushes, watching me and following me in a way that seemed threatening. That's why he had been flashing his car lights, to warn me. He said the man followed me all the way to my house and must have slipped into the backyard. The police reassured me and called my mum, who finally answered after a few tries. She spoke to the police over speakerphone, and they reassured her everything was under control. The police offered to take me to a friend's house for the night, and I stayed there until my parents got home early the next morning. Nothing in the house was stolen, which was the scariest part. The intruder wasn't there to rob us. They were there for me. That night, I realized just how close I came to real danger, and it's something I'll never forget.